Hello, my name is Pablo Requena and I would like to show you today how I do the herringbone. There are many ways of doing this job, so I can only explain the way that I do it, and hopefully that will help you to do your own. So what we are going to be doing is this type of herringbone. You can see this is quite small, so I don't know if you can see that in the camera. And it's one of the elements of this rosette that I have just put together here. And again, this is all quite small, so I don't know if you can see well in the camera, but you can get an idea of what we're talking about. In this guitar in particular, the herringbone also goes all the way around the perimeter of the soundboard. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. The first thing to do, the first job to do, is to select your veneers. For this job, we're going to be using green and white veneers, and they all are 0.5, 0.6 of a millimeters. So the first job to do is to make a block, and this block, so that you have an idea, the dimensions of this block is 28.5 millimeters by 33, and the length is about 190 millimeters. So with this you should be able to make loads of herringbone. So the first thing that we do is clamp them all together, and the right sequence for this job in particular, you can change that according to whatever rosette you're doing, but for this one in particular you need to have one white veneer and then two green ones, and so on. So basically you go sandwich them all together, and this is what you're going to end up having. What I would say is that don't be tempted to clamp too many of them together at the same time, because then what will happen is that they will slip around too much, but also it will be very difficult to keep even pressure when you're clamping them. So then these lines later on, they will not be very even. So what I would suggest is do one veneer at a time, and then you can add on another veneer every few hours. So it'll take you a few days to do a block like this, but I think it's worth it. Once you got the block glued up, then you just need to plane the sides and true everything up so that everything is 90 degrees to each side. So once you have your block, what you're going to do is to decide what angle do you need to have the herringbone done properly. So for this one in particular, the angle is 9 degrees. So what that means, if I go back to my sample here, is that the angles of the white lines in relation to the center white line is 9 degrees. So what that means is that I need to trace a 9-degree angle line in here. I put another one there which actually is not right. So when you have your line traced, you go to the bandsaw and cut it along that line, and you will end up having two wedges. And then what you're going to do is to glue them back together, but you're going to be gluing the clean side together with the clean side, so that you form another block again. But what you get is this. This one is a bit thinner because I've already cut the strips to be able to do this. But you can see that in doing that, the original faces, you can see there would be, that's the line, I have drawn it there, hopefully you can see it well, but that's where these two faces would have been. But because I've glued them again, basically what I've done is to have a rectangle, but the lines, they all have the 9 degrees that we wanted to have. So from there, what we're going to do is to start cutting slices. So before we do any cutting, because these two faces are rough, because they are the faces that were cut, because they were the ones internally here, what I have here is a couple of pieces of sandpaper, and all I've done is to join them with a little bit of tape so that it's a bit longer. And all you need to do is to put a few pencil marks in both sides, because then you know when everything is clean. So you can see that as the pencil disappears, that's telling you when the face is completely flat. But do it carefully, because it's very easy to put too much pressure on one side or in the other one, and then you end up having lines that are not perpendicular to this edge. So be careful with that. So once you have both sides nice and clean, then you go to the bandsaw and set up the bandsaw so that you can cut a very thin strip. Now, for this job, I've worked out that because the total thickness of the herringbone is 1.5 millimeters, it means that each one of the strips that are going to come together to form the herringbone needs to be 0.6 of a millimeters. So I set up the bandsaw to cut strips that are not much thicker than that. You can make them thicker, but then it means that you're going to have a lot more work later on. So if you have a brand new blade, it will cut really well and you will be able to do it. These ones, they are just over 1 millimeter, or I don't know, just thereabouts. Yeah, 1.06. So that's perfect. But then we have a problem, is that this is really short. We're not going to get the length that we need. So what you're going to be doing is, for this length in particular, you have 1, 2, 3 and 4 of this. So in here I got another 2 that I've prepared earlier, I have left over. But basically all you need to do is to cut 4 plates of this block, which is what I've done here. I've cut 6 of this block actually, so you can see I have plenty more that I can do later on. But before you go to cut to the bandsaw, we've cleaned one side, then we cut one, then we come back to the sandpaper and clean the face again, and then you go back and cut it again. So what that means is that each one of these plates have one clean flat side and one rough sawn side. Okay, so that's going to make the job easier later on. So once you have all 4 is what I need for the length that I want. You can work it out for your own guitar, what you're doing. If you're doing the rosette, it doesn't need to be as long, obviously. So now you need to join them. So the way that you're going to join them is, well, the way that I did it, hopefully it will help you do it yourself, is that at the end of this board, with the plane, I've planed this little bevel, which is 9 degrees. And I know that it's 9 degrees because all I've done is to set it up on my gauge here, and then I bring it there, so I know I have 9 degrees here, which is also the same angle that I've got in the strips. So all I need to do now is to, very carefully, I need to plane off this end. So I'm going to show you my block plane. The block plane needs to be really, really sharp, and also it needs to be set very thin, so that the shavings are really, really like smoking paper. So what you're going to do is bring that right to the edge, and then you're just going to cut very, very gently. It's cutting really next to nothing. Okay, and once you got the angle right, then to finish it off, I don't want to take this off because I'm going to show you in a minute, but basically with a block with sandpaper, you can use this as a guide and finishing off this angle. Now, one thing that is quite important is that when you join them, you need to decide where you're going to be cutting, because I can't just cut the angle and join them together, because then, you know, their sequence might not be right. So you need to decide where you're going to be cutting this one, so that when you do that one, they join together really well. What I like doing is removing half of the green in this side and half of the green in the other side, so that then I know that when they come together, it's quite easy to get them to join properly. Once you got a good match, what I do is to turn it around, get a little bit of masking tape. So I'm just going to get some from here. I get a little bit of masking tape and put it in place, so that the masking tape is going to help me to locate everything. So I put 2 pieces of tape. This one you can see is not being joined properly. I'm just explaining what the method, and then you can do it at home. And then I open it up, I put the glue, and then I know that the tape is going to bring everything back together. And then all you need to do is to get a block with a bit of tape and clamp them together. Leave it for a couple of hours so that it goes really hard, and then you can join the other ones. So you join one at a time until eventually you got the right length. Okay, so let me take this out of here before we keep going. So far so good. Now you have one long strip like this one, but because I've done all of this, it's not as wide as it should be. Originally it was as wide as this, and you can see here that I've got a little bit of shiny glue there, so you can see where the joints were, one in there, one in here, and one in there. But in the other side it's all clean, because it's the sides that were cleaned before we cut them in the bandsaw. So all I need to do now is to cut 4 strips, because I want to do 2 sides. So I need to have 4 strips so that when they come together they become 2 of them. And what we're going to do is, when we cut them, sorry, this is a bit fiddly and it's moving around. When we cut them, we're going to number them. So you can see that each one of these strips has got a number on the top. So this one is number 1. Then I set it up in my bandsaw and I cut it. If you come down here and I can show you how I've done the bandsaw. What I've done here is to set up the fence at 4mm, and then I've got a sacrificial board there because I want to have good support here and I don't want to have a big gap underneath to make sure that the herringbone is well supported, because it's very fragile and I don't want it to break. So I cut it along at that set, and basically that gives me 4mm in width. So if we go back here on the bench, I cut one of them and then I put a number. Then each one of them has got the right number. So you can see I've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, and this is how they were together originally. I know this is got all stuff done to them and everything, but I'm sure you can see how this was originally. Oh, it's a bit fiddly, but we'll get there. And it's quite important to do that because, so you can see that's how it was originally. As I've been cutting them, I've put the numbers because I want to pair them up in such a way that the 2 first, they're going to be joined together to do 1, and the other 2, number 3 and number 4, are going to come together to be doing the other herringbone. Why is that important? Well, it is important because when they come together, this one I've already got the white veneer, but I will explain that in a minute. When they come together, if you want the points to line up properly, like they do here, they need to be cut one from, basically they need to be right next to each other when they're cut. Okay, because you can see there's a little bit of discrepancy on how they line up the lines, the white and green. So if they're not adjacent, or I'm not really sure if that's the right term, but if I get the first one and then I get the last one, what you will get is that some of these points, maybe I can show you in here better, to be able to get all these points to line up properly, it needs to be done that way. Because if you use the first one and then you use another one from the end of the block, sometimes they don't line up properly, and then it means that, you know, it still will look okay, but I think this way it looks a little bit neater. Okay, so we got 4 strips, and each strip, it's got the same thickness as this, which is about 1mm, and we know we have one clean side and one rough side. So all we need to do, I'm going to put these ones to one side, and I'm just going to work on one of them. I need to be able to get this strip to be 0.6 of a millimeter, and you can see how fragile this is, so you have to really be quite careful. Okay, so also don't rush it. If somebody's waiting for you for dinner, it's not the right time. Give yourself plenty of time to do this. So what I want to do is to be able to reduce the thickness to 0.6 of a millimeter. So there's a few ways of doing this. If you haven't been able to cut them as thin as I've done, and your plate is much more than 1 millimeter, then what I would do is to use the block plane and sharpen your blade really well, get a really clean edge, very sharp, and then set it up so that you're cutting next to nothing. Really important. But in this case, because I've been able to do it quite thin, what I'm going to use is a block with some paper, and what I've done is that I've stuck a veneer 0.6 of a millimeter, and I just hold it with masking tape. So normal veneer, like the ones that I've used for putting this together, if I put a piece of veneer here and a piece of veneer there, I know that as I'm cleaning this, eventually it will get down to the right level, and that will end up being the same thickness as the veneers that I've got here. So just take your time. It takes 10-15 minutes to do each one of them, and always hold the veneer or hold the strip from one end and work away from it. Don't go like that because you will end up breaking it. So don't be tempted, be very careful. So you can actually hold it quite near to the area where you're working, and you can see this one is not bringing any dust because it's already been done, but that's really how you should be doing it. So now you got all 4 strips at the right thickness, which is roughly about 0.6. So what we want to do is to get number 1 and number 3. So I got strip number 1 and strip number 3, and I'm going to stick them in a 0.3 veneer. So this veneer was a little bit wider, and what I did was to clamp them both together, because that way, having 2 veneers, it means that when I clamp, it's easier to keep the right level and it's easier to keep even pressure. But now I have separated one of them. You can see this one is called the white veneer at the back, and this is the other one that I will be doing later, but I just wanted to leave it like that so that you could see what it looks like. I know it's sort of twisted and everything, but honestly that's not going to be an issue. So all you need to do is, once you clamp them on, get a very sharp knife like this one, and all you need to do is to trim it all the way along until you separate the veneer. And because it's 0.3, it's quite thin, so you can go through it quite easily. So now we have one of the sides of the herringbone stuck to the 0.3 veneer. So all that is left to do is to get the matching side, which is number 2, and now we have to glue them in the right way. So please be careful that when you glue them together you look at it and you see the herringbone, otherwise what you see is 2 parallel lines, which is wrong. Okay, so be careful that that's not what's happening. What you want to do is to bring them how they, that's it, bring them how they weigh together, and they will come together this way so that you get the herringbone. So how are we going to glue this together? Okay, again, there might be different ways of doing it, but the way I do it is that I put a little bit of glue along the strip here, and I spread it all the way around with my finger, and then I bring the other side to it. I make sure that they're flush on the top, and if they are 100% flush on the top, then I know that all the points all the way along they will line up, and it will be a good looking herringbone. And then I have here nylon or fishing wire, which is nylon basically. I like using this because the glue is not going to get stuck to it, and also it's really tough, so I can put quite a bit of tension and it won't break. That doesn't really need it, but I know that it won't break. But also it's very thin. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that on the floor, and I'm not going to glue it now because it's going to be messy and it's not going to work while I'm filming, but I can show you how I do it, and hopefully you can do it at home. So once I've got everything ready, all I need to do is to get the fishing wire and I'm going to start wrapping it around. In the beginning you just make sure that it starts and check that it's flush on the top, and then all you need to do is wrap it around the whole length. It doesn't even, you know, the wire doesn't need to be really so close, but you need to be doing it all the way along. And what that will do is that it will keep those two faces lining up so that they don't slip and you lose the alignment. That's quite important because you don't have a lot of thickness here, so you want to make sure that it comes together properly. So okay, this we need to do all the way along. I'm just going to do it very quickly so that I can move on to the next part, and I could do it a bit closer, but for the sake of explaining this, I'm just going to put it together. Okay, so I've come to the end here, and all I need to do is to make a very simple knot. Don't make it too big because it's just going to get too thick there. It's just to hold it like that. So this is my first herringbone. Once I've done the same to the other one, which where is the other strip? Here. So I got this strip ready. To be able to do this, I will need to trim this up, so I'm not quite ready to do it. But once I have them both, then what I do is that I put brown tape on this board and then put one right next to the other one, and then I have a strip of MDF with tape in one side as well, so that nothing sticks to it. And then all you need to do is to line them up properly, both of them, and then put the board on top. Just check that everything is going down in the right way. And once you have them both, you can clamp this. You don't need a lot of pressure. It's just enough to hold everything together. And after a few hours, you can come back and you can remove the nylon very easily. And then, you know, obviously these ones are coming apart because there's no glue, but when you remove it and the glue is there, they will stay together. And that's how you create the strip of herringbone that you need. Okay, so far so good. Now we have the strip that we need, but now we need to bend it. Okay, so you can see that there's only one continuous length in the middle. Everything else on the sides is not continuous length. So if I bend too harshly, if I bend it too quickly or too much, I could split them a little bit. So bend it with enough heat and gently so that you don't snap it. But don't be tempted to glue one veneer in one side and one in the other side, which is what we have here. We put them in individually. Okay, so when you look at the rosette, you can see, let me see if I can point it with this. You got the herringbone, but then you also have one green veneer next to it and another green next to it. But they came in individually. If I try to bend it and it's got the veneers stuck to it already, you'll never bend it and you will break it. So don't be tempted to make it stronger, because then you will break it when you bend it. So this is what it should look like when you're bending it. The only continuous strip is in the middle. And basically this is how you do the herringbone. I hope you find it helpful. I know I've given you a lot of information, but it is a big job, and it really is worth to take the time. Don't rush it. Be very gentle with all the strips because they're all very brittle. They break very easily. So if you're careful, you won't have any problems. And then if you break any of the strips, then hopefully you got more material to be able to cut another one and do it again. So I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions or something is not quite clear, please send me an email and I'll try to explain. I know this kind of thing is not so easy to understand in a video. I've done this video because several people have asked me to do it in the hope that they can do it themselves with what I explained. But really what you need is to join one of my courses and come along and do it with me, and I'll show you all the steps and I'll do it together with you so that you can really get a top-notch result. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you the next time.